All right, good morning, everyone. I gather people have been talking about the Middle East, technology, Russia, Ukraine. Right now, we're going to talk about Baltic Sea security. I'm Charly Salonius-Pasternak. After about 2 decades at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs, I decided to go to the private sector, so I'm now working as a CEO of something called the Nordic West Office, a Helsinki-based geopolitics think tank, but fundamentally following the same things. I want to thank the organizers for ensuring that the room is full, maybe in cooperation with the Russian authorities and the shadow fleet's activities from the last week. The quote associated with this panel, LBJ's "We did not choose to be guardians of the gate, but there's no one else," is of course a reference to why he thought the United States should be active in Vietnam. But it's also relevant, the speech, to our topic today, because a few sentences before that quote, he says, "Our power," referring to the United States, "therefore is a very vital shield. If we are driven from the field in Vietnam, then no nation can ever again have the same confidence in American promise or in American protection." Now, I think LBJ overestimated the impact on American credibility of U.S. withdrawal from Vietnam, but we kind of saw similar rhetorics in 2021 in the fall. I remember even being in this room and having many Americans kind of lament the fact that the United States was never going to be able to lead, never going to be trusted again. And yet 6 months later, the United States is leading and being a key actor in helping arm and support Ukraine. There's a final quote from this speech, though, that I think is also something to draw inspiration on for today. LBJ says, "3 times in my lifetime, 2 world wars and Korea, Americans have gone to far lands to fight for freedom. We have learned at a terrible and brutal cost that retreat does not bring safety and weakness does not bring peace." And I feel this applies to Ukraine as well as to the Baltic Sea region. At a tactical level, it's been the Baltic Sea states, JEF, NATO, that have really responded. So it turns out there are other guardians at the gate, not just the United States. With that, we're going to do the panel in about the same fashion as yesterday. So introductory comments, 15, 20 minutes. Then we'll have a discussion and then open it up for questions and comments here. In terms of the panelists, you can all read, so we're not going to do long-form introductions. We have here Estonian Defense Minister Hanno Pevkur. Then we have the Lithuanian Foreign Minister Kęstutis Budrys. Then Dr. Anna Wieslander from the Atlantic Council Northern Europe Director. Then we have Roderich, Kiesewetter, Member of Parliament from Germany, and Lieutenant General John Mead, Deputy Chief Commander at Brunssum. If we go from Tallinn over to the Atlantic, Hanno, would you like to start with some thoughts?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. And yes, it is a topic we need to talk about. And just as a introductory comments, a couple of words. I would define 3 lines where we have to have the clear answers. First is when we talk about the critical infrastructure and protecting the critical infrastructure, then we all understand that the seabed has been a safe environment for decades, and now it's not anymore. And definitely, in a normal way, on the land, we see that every owner of the critical infrastructure is also responsible to protecting it. In the seabed, it's not the same, unfortunately, although it should be the same. But nevertheless, countries are taking more responsibility, and this is one of the issues. And this is why we had also Baltic Sentry. This is why we have our own maritime operation still ongoing. And this is why we are defending and protecting the critical infrastructure. The second line I would bring is the is the maritime security and environmental question. So we have shadow fleet, normally one-layered in a very bad technical condition vessels, and we have to deal with that. So this is a question, for us as nations. Baltic Sea is very shallow. When something happens here, this is a huge environmental catastrophe. And the third line is maybe the most critical one, what we do with the shadow fleet. So we have around 500 shadow fleet vessels cruising or sailing on the seas, and when we take that, around 60 to 80% of Russian oil export by the sea goes through the Baltic Sea. Then we all understand how critical it is for Russia to defend it, how critical it is for Russia to maintain it. And now is the question that can we do something here in the Baltic Sea or internationally? Yes, we can talk about extreme measures like closing the Danish straits for the sanctioned vessels. But this is not only the Danish decision, it's more broad issue. We can talk about putting more penalties or something, to those vessels heavily, which are sanctioned, or we have to find solutions how to control the shadow fleet. And then when we can control the shadow fleet, then we will also take a huge amount of money out of the Russian war machine. So those three lines of the work for me are most important ones. And now coming to this week's incident, not going to all the details, my understanding is very clear that Russia was prepared for that. Russia definitely wanted to send a message that they will take the responsibility of the shadow fleet. So they basically link directly Russian government to the shadow fleet, and it's now for us as an international community to respond to that. But nevertheless, it's the first time when we see that Russian fighter jets come to escort the shadow fleet vessel. At the moment, this one was without the flag, but before it had a Gabon flag. So you have a Gabon government and Russian government linked directly, but this Gabon, of course, is not important at the moment because Russia is taking its steps. So for introduction.
Okay, thank you. Hanno.
Thank you. Well, I thought I would start by moving back in time a little bit just to get a perspective on what we're seeing now with the magnitude of the importance of the shadow fleet. I'm thinking of 2013, 2014, just when Russia was about preparing and do its illegal annexation of Crimea, starting the war in Donbass. That was really a brutal awakening for security in the Baltic Sea region. Not, I think, for the Baltic states or Poland as much for the Nordic states. So that's really when we had to shift our perspective and realize that this was something had happened that we had not really thought would come. Yeah? We had a bit underestimated what Russia was preparing. And then things developed. I will fast forward. Sweden became a NATO member in 2024, which kind of sealed the deal around the Baltic Sea, and we called it a NATO lake. We felt that now we had really increased security. In a way, we have, of course, a strategic grip around the Baltic Sea, which we didn't have before. But at the same time, this was when it kind of escalated with the sabotage and the infrastructure hitting, where we saw various incidences, and we felt that this is getting a bit out of control. And I think, in a way, that's also when we once again woke up to a bit of a brutal reality and realized that this shadow fleet, which was like a pretty vague concept, used to be some ships transporting goods to countries like Iran or Venezuela. From 2022, I mean, Russia had built this fleet, as you said, 500 vessels or something like that, 17% of the global oil tankers that are available and are part of the Russian shadow fleet. And actually, Russia was able to increase its oil exports revenues between 2023 and 2024 only with 5%, but still quite skillful, given all the sanctions and the oil cap and all of that. So we suddenly had to realize that this was not something in parallel to Russia's way of generating or sustaining its war economy, which and its economy overall, where oil and gas is like 40% of that total. The shadow fleet is at the core of that whole system, and I think we realized that somewhere around 2024 and started also the sanctions of the vessels that have now taken place in January and UK and the EU twice. I think that's extremely important in starting to get to this phenomena systematically. Because you can put 20 different suggestions on the table how to, talk more to Panama or these countries that give out the flags or issue insurances and all of that is good. But I think the first step is to realize the magnitude of this for the Russian economy and what we have to, how can we hit at it at a systemic level. And I think sanctioning basically all the vessels, why not? That's one first step. This is illegal. It will force Russia to move into the more mainstream tankers because it's impossible to keep it like this if everyone is sanctioned. And I think that will also give a possibility to lower the cap, the price of the oil cap below again, which could give us a better position that this will actually have an effect on Russia's war economy. So we need to work on that systematically. Now, coming back to Baltic Sea security and this incident that we had this week with Estonia, and where Russia actually went up with a jet fighter in direct conjunction to the tanker. I think that's an incident that we really have to watch very closely as well. This is the first time they do this, and it's a signal from Russia that these fleets are at the core of their national security. This is very important to them. And if I'm right in this trend that we are squeezing them with the sanctions and the fleet, this will become even more focal to them. So here we really need to think about what is the NATO response to this, because I think this will not be the first incident. Coming here and preparing for this panel, I thought of the incidents that Sweden had in the early 50s, 1952, in the summer of 1952, the Soviet Union then shot down one of our unmanned planes that were doing radio signaling on international waters, possibly a little bit over the Soviet Union, but it was shot down, disappeared in the Baltic Sea, and they didn't talk about it until 1991 when the archives opened, and the plane was found in 2004. So just amazing. And it didn't stop there. So in 1952, they also shot down one of the planes that was out searching for the missing plane over international waters. So I'm just saying this, we have to remember how does Russia view the Baltic Sea, and what are they able to do when they feel that there is space to act in a certain manner. So I think we should both take lessons from the past and look a bit ahead. And final point, this needs to be a joint action. I think the Baltic Sentry, with that NATO initiative, is really a good step. We should take advantage of this being a NATO lake, but we're not really there yet. But I think we can work with that approach.
Okay.
Thank you.
Learn from history, and I will ask about shooting things down later. Kęstutis.
Thank you. And I will start where you finished, with the Baltic Sea being the lake of NATO lake, and I totally agree that we are not there yet. It is geographically, yes, we can make a picture, we see the countries around, but whether we own it like it's ours, that we have to take responsibility for what is happening there. I'm not talking within the, I'm talking within the international law. I'm not talking about moving the boundaries of our territorial waters, because we don't. Because each time when we react to something that is happening in the Baltic Sea, we are a bit from the side, and we are looking, so who can do what in the current situation? And I think that's the absolutely initial step that we have to do. Just understand that it's ours responsibility, for many reasons, because of the Baltic Sea vulnerabilities, as Hanno just said, it's shallow, a lot of infrastructure on the bottom of the sea, and there are more reasons to be more careful. For me, this problem falls into three pillars, so to say. That is the shadow fleet as such, and it's not only the Baltic Sea, this is phenomena that is global. Of course, now the intensity is huge, and it changed in this perspective. The second pillar, this is the military aspect and then security aspect to it, and it's because of the very recent developments. And third, that's the sanctions and circumvention of sanctions and what we are doing in purpose to prevent it. So talking about the shadow fleet as such, I see some of the faces here in the room that know in the details how it is organized, what companies, how they are related to the Russian-owned companies, how the business is organized, who is behind, how fast we can do it, where are the vulnerabilities in Europe, who is selling those oil tankers to the companies that have the different flags around the world. That's European companies that are doing this by the majority of it, and we know it. And I know that in the certain circles, this all information is there. Then the question is what we do about it. And our approach is, of course, first of all, we have to sanction those vessels. And then the paradox is that only recently, actually with 17th package, I'm not even sure whether legally it is already in there, but anyways, the next week, the Foreign Affairs Council meeting will adopt it as the new package. We have around 200 additional vessels. And this is around 350 in total sanctioned by EU. We have less sanctioned by US and UK, but the thing is that there is only less than half of them that overlap in those sanctions. It means that we still have a job to do just to put all those vessels that we know that were once in one of the ports that export Russia's oil products and just put them in a sanctions list. That would be the first thing. Of course, the outcome of it and the result of it, there are problems with the insurance, then there are problems with crews, with captains, and then this is how we reduce the quality and the training of it. And because of that, we have another risks related, because they're unprepared to the different situations. And some of the incidents that happened in the Baltic Sea was because of that, because the crew didn't know what they're doing in there. I guess those were the ones who are taking risks, getting into the ship that is without insurance, getting somewhere into the Baltic Sea and doing rounds there. So this is one of the lines of efforts. And I see as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, that's my responsibility, also to push further for the sanctions and to increase this list. If it is around 700, 700 vessels that were used in these operations, I want to see them all in it. And we have to reduce, there is another element in it, to reduce the level of the proof that we have to bring there. Because if UK is okay with sanctioning, why it has to be the different background for EU to sanction the same vessel? So this is about the vessels. Another element is related to our overall rules in the Baltic Sea. Because we had, I don't know how many discussions among the international law experts. So what UNCLOS allows us, what they don't, and always the answer is yes, it's not clear. So let's make it clear. If it allows us, let's write the our protocols that would allow us to protect the Baltic Sea. If it is not against it, so let's do it. If we have the right to inspect some vessel without the flag, as it was in the very recent case. So let's get there and check what is, and we will be within the UNCLOS still. Because I see a lot of scope there also to increase the regulation what concerns Danish straits, how they get into the Baltic Sea, because they get there in there. We can even visually see all of them, and then how they go through our exclusive economic zone. At the end, it's ours, and we have to also the responsibilities to protect our coast because of the many of the reasons. So this is a lot of work to do for the legal experts. Just get there and write the normal instructions. That would be within the UNCLOS, because we are not here to change the regulation, because it will take time and it will be difficult, and we will have the better result. As the minimum, it will increase the cost for all of those, or it will force to think again whether we should go there or not with this vessel that is sanctioned already. And the third element, That is Russia's involvement with the military force. And that's why these week's events, I think they changed the overall assessment and picture. Because Baltic Sentry, the NATO mission here in the Baltic Sea, was because of the protection of our underwater critical infrastructure, first of all. And now with Russia's presence, with the Su-35 to protect this vessel from Estonian authorities taking over, it shows the different than the area of the activities. They are showing the force, they are creating the incident, they are entering even the NATO airspace because of protecting these vessels. And this is the connection then between both. And that's why we have not only to continue Baltic Sentry, but to expand this mission, because the increased activities of the Shadow Fleet increases the probability of military incidents in the Baltic Sea. And this is serious. And the final element, we have to learn from all these incidents. And like from this very recent with Jaguar, I checked before entering the room, where is she? Where is Jaguar right now? So she is in Primorsk, and 6 hours already, and highly likely it is filled with the crude oil right now, and highly likely in 18 or 20 hours she will leave Primorsk and will cross the exclusive economic zone through Finland or through Estonia, and will try to leave the Baltic Sea. So what will be our response, the countries of the Baltic Sea? And whether we will react when they will pass, will we try to inspect this vessel? This is also a test for us. And my position is we have to go for it and go and get the answer. So what happened? And this time, whether will be the flag or not, if there is no flag, it means that jurisdiction, non-existent. International law was written for the states. And there is the flag, there is the jurisdiction. No flag, no jurisdiction. That means that we have to go forward and to get the answers as the minimum. Thank you.
All right. All right. And Roderich.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Charlie, and also for the invitation. I'm really encouraged after some years of reluctance and complacency that the new German government is taking some incidents more serious than it was in the past. As Kęstutis just said, we have to learn from the incidents, but what does it mean? 3 brief remarks. First of all, the new German government, I'm a parliamentarian, sees the Baltic Sea as a testbed, as a laboratory for Russia. They have changed in the last 3-5 years their conduct, their behavior. They are mapping our critical infrastructure. They are preparing seabed warfare, and we see it with the ruins of Nord Stream. There are also some mistakes laid down on the ground of Nord Stream of our former policy. There is no change by trade, and there's also no security by trade with Russia. So what does it mean? Russia has changed its maritime strategy so that civilian ships are used by military, and they exploit crink, which means that they cooperate with Chinese trade ships. So, second remark, what do we have to do? The German government, more reluctant than, for example, Great Britain or the Baltic states or Poland, was quite reluctant until the 14th package of sanctions of the European Union. Still, we sanction only war goods and not dual-use goods. So we are looking forward to the 17th package, where we have to contain more or to map out also more civilian vessels, more shadow fleet vessels, and we have to really prepare our own law. For example, we have brought up one ship, Eventim, last year, but this was not done by our Navy. It was forbidden for them. It was done by our tariff organization. So yes, you could do this with a tariff organization. You could do this also with the coast police. But to really give a sign of deterrence, you need to use also your Navy. So we are grateful that Rostock is existing, that the CTF, the Combined Task Force, is cooperating with Northwood. But there is still room for improvement, and the current government is working on it. Last remark, it's not only a question of means and a question of engagement, it's also a question of signaling and convincing the own population. Especially in Germany, the Russian narratives are really successful by believing in trade by change, by believing in Also, the idea that there must be talk, there must be concessions because Russia is in the room, and we have a party which is really exploiting the situation with the United States. They say, look to America, how they have changed, so the real neighbor is Russia. And therefore, we in Germany have the challenge to convince our population, and that's strategic communication, that it is not Russia who is our neighbor, but Poland, but the Baltic states, and that they were sacrifices of our own history some 80 years ago. And therefore, that we need to better cooperate, to improve military cooperation, and also the sanction system, and at least that when the Russians see the Baltic Sea as a test bed, as a laboratory, let's do the same. Use more artificial intelligence, use more better tools to improve the mapping, and then try to strengthen this in the transatlantic realm, especially regarding the sea lines of communications, where 20% were not functioning since 2022. So we really have to use that, what we learn, as Kęstutis said, in the Baltic Sea to make the Mediterranean more safer and also to make safer the transatlantic sea lines of communication. Thank you.
Great, and good segue to the Atlantic more broadly.
Thank you.
Last thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. So just to return to that first quote about the Guardians, and just to portray, there's been 18,000 soldiers, sailors and airmen deployed on Exercise Hedgehog this week in Estonia, which I think is a remarkable demonstration of resolve and readiness. And I make that point because it's directly related to this question of security in the Baltic Sea and my role and our role in NATO in running the Baltic Sentry mission. I think it's been a very powerful demonstration of adaptation and the strength of the alliance, our ability to deter adversaries and build real-world readiness in areas such as information exploitation. And I'll just come on to three main reflections, because I think this adaptation aspect, NATO not always accused of that, but I think it's been very, very strong on this mission, is really important because we're going to get tested. There's going to be more incidents. There's going to, we're in a very calm manner reflecting on the incident of this week. But I would say that the first one is about our presence and posture. And sometimes that really does need very visible demonstrations to deter by denial. We had to do that early on. I remember being notified on Christmas Day at 12:26 was when the S-Link 2 cable was damaged, and we stood up our crisis action team in Brunssum. We did the same in Northwood with the maritime component, and that dialogue with nations, principally Estonia and Finland, started straight away. But that ability to adjust our posture and then bring in different domains. So I think we've had more than 130 scrambles of air policing, Baltic air policing, to augment posture, to augment our surveillance capabilities, has been really significant. We've had US Marines deployed into Finland with drones to augment our surveillance. We've had a lot of airborne early warning aircraft up. So what I'm saying is that we've constantly adjusted our posture. We've constantly adjusted national assets with NATO commanded assets. And I think, let's not forget, this is the first run out of Finland and Sweden in an operation of this scale. And you wouldn't even know it's been utterly seamless. So I think there's some very strong lessons that we will take forward into how we do these operations in the Mediterranean, but also more broadly with critical national infrastructure in other areas. So some powerful lessons there. I would say the C2, the command and controls work pretty well. It's a secure directed mission. My headquarters is the supported command. Marcom is the supported component. And we've got a brand new headquarters in Rostock, CTF Baltic, under German command, but now within NATO, that's been doing the integration across the Baltic Sea. I think that has been a remarkable success story. Just second quick lesson, I think, is always about data and information. That has been challenging, but has been a story of progression as we seek to try and track, hundreds and indeed thousands of vessels, work out which is a vessel of interest, how the sanctions lists are changing, and there's lots of sanctions lists and they change all the time, and how you apply some artificial intelligence to actually make sense of that. And that's a work in progress. I think that's got a lot better. It's going to get better yet as NATO introduces the Maven Smart system, which we will run out on exercise next week on steadfast deterrence, which my headquarters is very much involved with SHAPE. Final reflection in terms of lessons is this aspect of adaptation and deterrence through innovation as well. So through the course of June, we're going to be rolling out and experimenting with a fleet of surface and subsurface drones, which is called Task Force X, underneath Allied Command Transformation in the Baltic Sea, to augment our surveillance. This aspect, the whole aspect of vigilance is the price of liberty, to really, really double down on our vigilance activities within the Baltic Sea, to make this more secure, to make sure that ships are behaving in a lawful manner. And we will then, this aspect of adaptation, we will continue to adapt and see where, Russia now more directly responding. They will exhaust themselves very, very quickly if they want to kind of up their posture in escorting every single Shadow Fleet vessel through the Baltic Sea. So we will respond calmly and in coordination with the nations as to this latest incident. But they would be my major 3 reflections.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Some general questions, and then I have a few specific ones for each one. My main first question, I guess, is, and some of you have referenced this, is how can these actions which cause us to spend money, time, effort to repair critical infrastructure, how can the actions be made more costly to those who initiate them, since we fundamentally know who it is? And I'm not talking about the captain of the ship or the crew, but Russia. Are there other ways this can be made more costly to them, so they simply think this is no longer worth it?
Well, I would say that we have one case where you refer to the captain. So Chinese authorities have put into the custody one captain of the new polar bear. Of course, we don't know was that captain on that ship, and is that captain the same captain with the same name, or maybe it's a Chinese operative who will be interrogated shortly. But nevertheless, the point is that yes, we cannot put that on the captains. Although the captains have to know also the responsibility, and they have to take the responsibility because they are still sailing the ship.
Yep.
So they need to take the responsibility. They are paid for that. But nevertheless, when you talk about the responsibility, it's very difficult. We also see together with our Finnish friends how difficult it is to investigate, because when the vessel is out of our jurisdiction, then it's not very difficult, because in the maritime normally what you see that every vessel, every oil tanker is under a different company. So it's one company, one vessel. So they can easily let it go. It will be in bankruptcy very quickly, so there is nothing to take. And then is the question that can you go to the owner of the flag, or the country of the flag owner? So this is why it's not easy, but this is why I said also that you can put some sanctions, or you can put some fines or penalties, or however you do it. That let's say that we have a Shadow Fleet or sanctioned vessel in the Baltic Sea or somewhere in the Finnish Gulf. We identify it, and then we will go on board, or we will arrest it, and then it will be also under jurisdiction of one of or other country, and we will, just send the ticket basically. But this ticket cannot be 1,000 euros. It has to be 10 millions. Yep. So, and this is the question for all of us, that when you come into the Baltic Sea with the vessel which has problems, as we saw a couple of weeks ago with Kivala, with 34 different kind of problems on the vessel, then you will send a ticket, 10 millions, please. First day, second day, and the easiest way to put them to some kind of understanding or better understanding is through the economical measure. Because when you go with the criminal sanctions or penal code, it's not going to work. It's just too time costly, and it will not help you in reality. But the easiest way is to prevent it, and the easiest way is not to let them into the Baltic Sea. But I believe it's very difficult to get the consensus internationally. And then one more comment to Kęstutis. When we talk about the changing the UNCLOS or changing the regulations, we've looked very deeply into that. The problem the main problem with that is that our own vessels, not so many maybe from Estonia, but a lot from Denmark, for instance, Maersk, for instance, they're also sailing in the South China Sea or globally. And when we do some regulation here, then we are democratic countries and we respect the law. I'm more than sure that Chinese authorities will not respect the law, and then they will, or in contrary, they will respect the law and they will use it, and they will check every vessel from Europe sailing in the South China Sea or in Japanese Sea or wherever. So these are also the points we have to take into account when we start to talk about changing the maritime law. That it's not only for the Baltic Sea, but it's more global impact what we have to face with that.
Yeah, thank you, and I can answer that. I didn't, and I do not have the intent to change the convention on law of sea. I'm talking about the practices that we can adapt, that we can agree and then adapt within the UNCLOS. That allows us. And first of all, that is the right of the coastal country to identify the vessel that has no flag, first of all. Then inspect, then to ask for the, to ask to turn on the transponder, this AIS system as the minimum. And I'm okay with Lithuanian flag vessels being inspected in this way near China, if it goes in this direction. If some of the vessel is sanctioned, and we know that she is sanctioned, then we can approach also with certain questions the captain. And this is up to us to agree. And if it is to be then applied to different seas, I'm okay with that. Let's talk about it. But of course, if we will open the convention, I agree. We will be just stuck there because the situation has changed from the times it was written, and it was written for the different purpose. It was not written, to open, to close all the loopholes that authoritarian Russian regime that can exploit. The whole idea was different then. And then talking about the prevention and then responsibility and cost, as you asked, when we're talking about the cases when there is unintentional or some reckless behavior of the crew of the ship, that's the one package of the prevention, and then the criminal responsibility on the other. By the way, we have to also to synchronize the criminal codes around the Baltic Sea that we don't have, because in some of the countries there is no responsibility for destroying our infrastructure under the sea, and I think that is easier to do than to deal with the other package of the intents and the costs. That is Russia's. If Russia weaponize certain things, be it some of the institutions, or be it the vessels, or be it the other instruments that they see that are reachable, and when they see the result that they create, to increase the cost for them, that's not the criminal code. That's not something that we can, summon the ambassador Charly and just protest. It's not about that. We have to increase it asymmetrically and in other areas with, for example, military presence in the Baltic Sea. So what they try to convey us and to prove us that, okay, we in different conferences say, from now on, Baltic Sea is the NATO lake. And they're showing for us in the sea, no, it's not your lake, it's our operational area. And we do here certain things. And we send the strategic bombers, and then we send the Su-35 to also to convoy the vessel. They show that it's their own ownership more than the ours. And then we have to respond in this way for them to understand, to increase the cost. Finland's and Sweden's membership in NATO, that's the cost for Russia's activities. And also we have to think through this lens in other areas, because otherwise we will each time lose, because they have the different calculation, and their threshold of pain is different than ours.
Tell me, can the Foreign Affairs Council discuss the issue or the topic that, okay, let's take the territorial waters and economical zone of European Union countries, and the mean of the sanction or the point of the sanctions will not be that you are in the sanctions list, but we will say that any ship belonging to the sanctions list cannot enter to the economical waters of European Union. When we do that, we solve the problem.
It won't work like this, that it cannot enter at all, but we have to start by inspecting, because as you rightly said, there are hundreds of them daily crossing our exclusive economic zone. So, talking about the guardians, let's take two institutions. One, NATO, that we already talked with the Baltic Sentry, and with also Baltic Air Police that worked very fine in the current situation in Estonia. And this is another reason why we have to not only to continue but to expand it. The other institution, another guardian, that's European Union for sanctions, first of all, or circumventing the sanctions. And then we have other formats around the Baltic Sea, be it Council of Baltic Sea States. We have President Ilves here, who just wrote with my colleague Landsbergis the paper how to improve the CBSS and maybe also play the role in this field. It's for us, first of all, the countries of the Baltic Sea to agree on some code of practice, how we implement that, how we, first of all, inspect. And then we can proceed with other elements.
By international law, the economical waters are part of the free sailing. So this is the case, and then again, then to change that, you need to change also the UNCLOS, which says that then the economical waters are handled as territorial waters. But when you do that, then you say that, okay, when we take the Finnish Gulf, then there is no international water. There is only territorial water, economical zone from both sides, and that means that, Russia will get no access to the Russian ports. And then they will sail through the territorial waters. And to be honest, I don't want Russian military vessels to enter in our territorial waters. So there are many, challenges for us. But nevertheless, when we talk about the shadow fleet, which is the topic of today's, then I would say that, this is the option to say that even to the economical waters, any vessel belonging to the sanction list cannot enter. So because they cannot enter to the ports anyway. This is what we prohibit. But we cannot prohibit them to cruise that they will take or they will start coming from India, and then they will end up in the Ust-Luga or Primorsk. And we cannot control that through the whole sailing. So these are the challenges for us.
The other, it's raising costs.
Well, no, I think most of the levers against the shadow fleet are going to be economic, and our focus on Baltic Sentry has been primarily focused at the undersea protection of undersea cables, critical undersea infrastructure. Sometimes that coincides with the shadow fleet, but they're not one and the same issue, and some of the levers are different. And so NATO's responsibility has been to protect that undersea infrastructure, but also to assist the nations with the interrogation of safe shipping within the Baltic Sea. And I think we've hailed 1,800 ships now just to check their flag status for a start, which is, an UNCLOS right of ours. So consistency with UNCLOS, and, there are some further levers there in terms of environmental aspects of UNCLOS that could be further explored. But I think most of those levers are going to be, for the shadow fleet, are ultimately going to be economic ones in terms of enforcement of sanctions and the economic cost. We're there to enhance vigilance. We're there to make sure that this critical infrastructure is protected.
All right. Well, we've discussed turns, raising costs, economic ones. The Finnish Air Force charged further south some days ago. Air Force never says what it's doing, but Russia seems to be able to act quite asymmetrically. They're willing to do things we're not. Do we have to also make it clear that, let's say like Turkey in 2015, say, if you continue to violate our airspace, if you continue to threaten us militarily, we will shoot a plane down?
Yeah, very brief an example from last month. We had some drone overflights at a military installation in northern Germany, at the coastal side, where we train Ukrainian Patriot soldiers. And there were drone overflights, probably coming from the seaside, Russian drones. And we have only the law to shoot them down over the military area, but we don't have the means so far to do this at any place. And if it is not present, you can do it there. And second, outside the military space and airspace above the barracks, the local police is responsible. And imagine a local police fighting against the military drone, flying 5 times faster than the local police drone. So the consequence is to show deterrence is to adapt the domestic law. It's not a sign of weakness to talk about this. It's a sign of necessary strength to overcome this deficiency. So we are working on that. So if we want to show strength, we have to overcome own restrictions, and we have to exchange with our neighbors how they do it. And it is really also, Germany is very densely populated, so it's also a question of protection of the own population. And there I come back to my topic 3 or point 3 from the beginning. It's to really convince the population that we need to do more, that we are under threat, and that we have also to give up some complacency and to hand over more responsibility to those who can cope with that. That's military or some reinforcement part of our criminal investigation teams. So there is something to do, but it's also, it has to be explained.
I agree. One of the things Finland did after 2014 was go through all of its security-related laws. Completely unsexy, no one gets elected by that, but it enabled kind of closing a lot of loopholes. Who should be in charge of a certain operation, the Coast Guard, customs, police, etc. Anna, you had a comment, and then we're going to go to questions, so please put your hands up. I will take a few at a time.
Well, to your question, Charlie, that's also why I mentioned the 1952 example. At that time, Sweden was not a member of NATO. We were facing the Soviet Union, and at best, it became a diplomatic crisis. I think it was hardly a crisis. We had some talks, and I mean, we got nothing from them basically on this. So what I want to say with that is, I think if we are right in that what we saw last week, the Russian reaction to the Estonia incident, if that's something that will recur, of course we should not shoot down. I'm not saying we should escalate necessarily. I think it's you know, we have our procedures with the air police mission, but I think in our thinking, okay, if they escalate, what do we do? Are we prepared? And that's where I think the Turkish example is relevant, because we need, once again, to understand that we are acting from a position of strength in the Baltic Sea region. We should do that because we have it, but we're not there yet.
And it's our responsibility, as we've heard, to do this, not expect other guardians to show up. Okay, first question here. Oh, no, here. And then the next one is there.
Thank you. Am I on? Yes.
No.
Hello? Yes?
Yes.
Gabrielius Landsbergis and I just finished 5 months of work on a report to deal with these issues. And our conclusion was we'd have to strengthen something called the CBSS. Why? Because NATO has up till now said all of these incidents are, those are Article 4 thresholds. Don't bring this up as an Article 4 issue, not when we took Article 5, but no, don't even bring it. I mean, you've had a history of this. Now, I mean, basically, the report is really, I mean, whether it's good or not, but it is a monument to the failure of NATO to deal with security as it is. That's what the report really is. So we have to take this organization to say that, well, we have to do this because NATO is not dealing with it. And what is our problem? We have a country like Estonia, my country, and suddenly, we're trying to perform this action which is legal, set forth as a normal procedure to inspect a tanker that has no flag, and a Russian fighter jet comes in and buzzes us, and then, basically we say, what is collective defense for? And what are we going to do? Get the CBSS is going to do something? NATO has failed in this regard, utterly failed. And sorry, if we get here again that no, this is not an Article 4 thing, it's a national problem. Your country has to deal with it itself. Then what is the point of NATO? So my question is, if Estonia, Hanno, goes to NAC Monday morning and says, look, this happened, this is a major escalation, do you expect NATO to say, or some member states I won't mention here, say, no, that's your problem?
All right.
What do you think?
Thank you. If I can just take a few. So, former president of Estonia, Hendrik Ilves, if the next speakers or question askers could just introduce themselves, that way everyone here, there, and then the next one is going to go here.
Thank you. Anton Zhukhovtsov, Central European University, Vienna. I have a question to Minister Budrys and Minister Pevkur. My question is, in any shadow war, the attribution problem is basically the main problem. To whom you attribute the action, a particular effort. So with the recent cutting of the underwater cables, the attribution, of course, the problem again was at the surface of the whole discussion. There were several cases last year. A case, at least one, I think, this year already. But the panel discusses all those incidents as if those are actual incidents, while the media reports with references to European officials, I think American officials, said that that was an accident. So how do you explain this? Yeah. Is this an effort to de-escalate, or is there really no actual proof that those were incidents involving Russia? So what is happening now? Because those reports are really confusing, yeah? Saying that those are accidents. We don't have any proof. So how do you explain this? Thank you.
Now, so we're going to go NAC, attribution, third question, end of this first round.
Former Latvian Foreign and Defense Minister. I will continue on a different sphere and aspect what President Ilves already mentioned. Sorry for a bit sharp words, but don't you think we sometimes play that either Russians are stupid or we are stupid sometimes? Because yes, we can of course try to change international rules and maritime regulations. It will take decades. We are at war now. Secondly, Russians are not stupid, they are smart. They are playing under the legal radar, and they will do this because they know that we can't do the same, or we are not willing to do the same. So at the end, it is coming to three issues, which is political will, which is strategic communication, and which is actually a resilience of us. They know that we are not ready to engage. That is the point. And we can, of course, tackle shadow fleets. We can try to do something on the surface, but this is like a dog biting a newspaper, not a hand. What about simply stopping to buy in Europe Russian gas and oil? We are paying for the Russian war, and Commission is telling, look, we will stop it maybe in 28 because, it's very expensive. So are we ready to engage or not? Because these countries here where you are, Estonia and Latvia, we are not buying this anymore, and we are not actually economically unsuccessful, I would say. So either you are ready to engage or you're not. And we can, of course, dream about how we can attack one shape or check another or change international rules. But let's go to the core. Not buy gas and oil, give a strategic message to them that we are ready to engage, compromise and punish terminals and ports, and check really that we are not buying that oil from India or some other countries. So let's go to the root and then finish finally this war.
All right, great. There was one question directly to Hanno, but everyone else feel free to respond.
Very quick comments. First to President Ilves. So I believe that, well, we will see if that will be the case, that we will go to NAC and discuss that, what we will do or what should we have done. First, it's the question of legality, that we have Baltic air patrolling. And that means that when someone enters to the airspace of Estonia, then we need to escort them out, to identify and to escort out. So they are not engaging militarily. So when they engage, yes, then we will engage, but NATO will not shoot first. So this is the basic principle of air patrolling. And then I believe that this is also the case. And to be honest, you know, when they enter into our airspace, in that case, we had 1 minute of time. So then even when we go with our fighter jets to identify, to scramble, then by that time they are out. So we will, of course, not engage in international airspace. Second question about the attribution. Attribution is the key. And of course, we cannot attribute or to point the finger when we don't have the proofs. When we take the Estonian case of the group attacking the car of Russian journalist and the car of the Minister of Interior, then we were able to prove that these instructions came from Russian authorities. And we said that publicly. So with the new polar bear, it's much more difficult because, you know, as I said, this captain, whatever his name was, Wang or something, we don't know that. Was that the man behind the wheel? And the attribution is totally different story. So this is why we might have speculations. We might have some secondary proofs, but you cannot attribute directly. And this is why it will stay as a speculation. And regarding Artis' question of the oil and gas, I would say that, you know, regarding the shadow fleet, it's more important still to do or to deal with the with this, how we can basically execute or you know, put in real life the sanctions work. Because at the moment, you know, gas and oil, so these shadow fleet vessels will not transport anything to Europe. So they will take the gas or mostly the crude oil, and they will go to third countries. So they will not come to Europe. So European ports will not service those vessels. So maybe it's, you know, but in general, I understand the question and your comment, but it's not maybe linked directly to the shadow fleet.
With due respect, President, I just responding to the NATO aspect of that. Our mission has been firmly about the protection and deterrence for critical undersea infrastructure. Now, that does coincide with the shadow fleet on occasion, and this aspect of attribution is still an ongoing kind of question, as you're aware. But I would argue so far so good in terms of the unity that has provided for that aspect of protecting what is really, you know, vital infrastructure in terms of the gas and energy lines that cross the Baltic. And where they do coincide, and almost the attribution doesn't matter totally on this because it's still, the consequence is still severe. So if we're getting more of these, you know, lower trained, unfamiliar with the Baltic Sea crews coming in, we've got to track them because the risk goes up. So that's our lens for how we are in the military looking at this risk and focusing in on this aspect of infrastructure, because that's our mission.
On attribution, answering your question. So our track record, at least I can talk for Lithuania, it showed that when we were claiming something related to attribution, we had the very exact proofs of it. We had whether, you know, investigational material or whether intelligence material to prove that. Be it the different operations coming from Belarus on our border, being sabotage operations, or being the other activities of Russians. So when when we are saying that we know how it was organized, it meant that we know all the chain up to the institution in the Russian Federation that is responsible for it. So till we keep silent on the attribution means that we do not have yet the proof, but when we have it, we go with it publicly, because this is the way we think that we have to act, because we are not de-escalating in the way that keeping something silent and not saying it out loud. So in this current situation, if it was not given out publicly, it means that it's still ongoing. But there is the other aspect, the damage that was done. And the damage was the one that we cannot ignore without putting the preventive measures then in the form of Baltic Sentry, because the effects were not only for the region, that was also for the Europe. And I think after Baltic Connector was damaged, that was a sudden increase of 40% in the gas price in Europe. So we are dependent on it. That's why we have to put more as the prevention measures in there. So I do not see always the inevitable connection with the attribution and actions that we do, because we have to plan also in prevention. Then we will have attribution, or in the case we have attribution, then we have to respond, and in the broader terms, and then also asymmetrically, and not only in the Baltic Sea region. We know what is happening. It happens because of our support to Ukraine, because we want the different European security. So maybe we can also respond in other areas, with for example, larger security assistance to Ukraine, or be it faster. We have to think out of the region also. And the final thing, when we talk about the protection of underwater infrastructure, it's not the shadow fleet that's the main threat. We know the capabilities that Russians were developing from the Cold War times exactly for this purpose. And we know from the first day of the aggression, or minus 1 or 2 days before the aggression, they will cut our cables and they will disrupt our electricity and gas connections, and they have the sub-water capabilities for that. So yes, we are increasing our military presence for the very good reason in the Baltic Sea.
Just 10 seconds for Tom again. Regarding the military engagement, we changed the regulation in NAC last year, and we basically gave all the authorities to the SACEUR. So from the military point of view, SACEUR can engage immediately. The political debate will be later. So just purely from the military point of view, the military authorities have the right to engage.
Right. Question, attribution. Different countries have different strategic cultures. Is there coordination between the foreign ministries, defense ministers? Someone may feel like, yes, we will come out and say this. Others may want to not do so, and it has military implications. How does this work?
Well, regarding the attribution, again, attribution is never, well, when we talk about legality, then it's not a political issue. You have to have the proof to say that someone is guilty or responsible for that. We can, on the political level, we can speculate as long as we want, but when we have the attribution or saying directly that this was done by, or this was, let's say, orchestrated by the Russian authority, as we proved in our case in Estonia, when they attacked, or when they hired people from Estonia to attack the car of the Minister of Interior, then we can put that on the political level and say that, okay, now these will be the consequences. But as long we don't have the legal proof of that, then on the political level we can debate. We can say that most probably it was orchestrated by, but that will not give you the right to change something with the sanctions, or to attribute specifically it to someone.
I'm very grateful to the remark of Artis, and to refer to you, Hanno. Well, it's above all, it's political will. And not in vain we have this coalition of the willing to avoid abstention, to avoid blockage, but it's about credibility, it's about coercion, it's also about communications, but we have the capabilities. So the capabilities are available, but it's above all the political will. So why not every constitution foresees a certain conduct in these times of crisis? We call it case of tension. We avoid this so far in Germany, but if a coalition of the willing is able and prepared for a case of tension of, for example, the countries around the Baltic Sea, we call out a case of tension, meaning employment of specific forces, meaning also addressing the global south. What is happening there could also happen to you, so that we find a way of coercion in a form of coalition of the willing. It will not work in NATO, it will not work in the European Union due to known reasons. But if we don't do that, we avoid to show political will and to show a credible path out of the dilemma.
Thank you. We have at least 4 questions. There are 2 here. Then I would like to go back here and here.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Well, I got the mic, so I guess it's my turn.
Or,
Nope. Go
mine's
ahead.
live, so, okay. Well, I don't know.
Sure, go, yes.
All right. Tom O'Donnell, and I work in energy. I put my hat on as oil expert, taught for 25 years or something about the oil system. The whole purpose why the Americans intervened and told the Europeans not to sanction oil when the war, around the time of the beginning of the war, was so that Russian oil would not be taken off the market, so there wouldn't be a shock for all sorts of political reasons and technical reasons. And so it was designed to stay on the market if it's sold below, okay? The problem is the price of oil is coming down. It was at $60 a barrel Brent recently, which means at $2 or $3 normal discount on Urals, maybe as much as 7 sometimes, it's already below 60. And you can see during the process over the years, as the price goes up and down, they switch to the ersatz fleet and back to the normal fleet. But it's going to go below 60 soon, and they can legally use. So no pain, no gain. NATO countries or G7 has to decide, do they want this oil off the market or not? If they do, there's plenty of ways to do it. And this is not really the way to do it, in my opinion. We argued against this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting panel. Lots of questions that could be asked here. One is, one thing which hasn't been mentioned, I think, until now is the Joint Expeditionary Force, the JEF. There's a parallel operation, Baltic Sentry, Nordic Warden, and Nordic Warden is run by the JEF. That's really interesting to see, because they're using also AI-supported analysis to find the sort of needles in the haystack type of problem which this is. It's also geographically much wider, stretching all the way into the English Channel, including the English Channel as well. So the cooperation between JEF and NATO, I would be interested to hear more about this. Is there a possibility for enhancement here to make sure that this is even more clearly so? CBSS was mentioned here before, but this is maybe another track as well. The other thing is also, which I would like to bring up, is what can we expect in the future? We heard some comments here from Lithuanian Minister of Foreign Affairs on the issue of what the Russians might do. But if we all put our thinking caps on, what might be the next step in the evolution of their tactics and operations, given the fact that we might be successful? This might be not so bad what we've done, but what will they do in the next step? But not going over to Article 5. Thank you.
All right. That question, and I like that microphone over here, please.
Thank you very much. Carolina Muti, senior researcher at IAI, an Italian think tank. So Commander Mead was talking about protection of underwater critical infrastructure. And we know that in January 2023, NATO and the EU signed a joint declaration, and critical infrastructure protection was one of the areas to deepen the cooperation. So I was wondering, we know that there was also a task force dedicated to it, so I'm wondering if there are progresses on that and how it is going. And the second question is, considering how important private actors are in critical infrastructure protection, in maintaining the subsea cables, in putting them there, in owning them. So what are the best practices, if there are any best practices on public-private cooperation in this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we have one last question, and then you can pick whatever question you want to answer.
Thanks. Hi, Alex Finley. Thank you for the panel. My question goes back to the political will, because as you've all pointed out, the shadow fleet is a core part of the Russian economy. If you starve it, you're then starving a number of the other operations, the influence operations, which are creating different narratives which make it difficult to get your public on your side. You also, if you do attribution, there's this whole question of, is it sabotage or is it an accident? But it's negligence. We know that a lot of this is being done by the shadow fleet, which are negligent ships being sent out by Russia to help their economy and to evade sanctions. So I don't understand why there isn't the political will, because it seems like you hit a number of different strategic spots by stopping those vessels.
Well, I will start there very briefly, just pick a couple of comments. I believe that yours and the question of the oil are linked directly, because that of course we could just say that okay, we closed as I said, we closed the Danish straits for the sanctioned vessels, and the Russian oil export, at least through the sea channels, is closed. So we don't have it anymore. So and that kills 60 to 80% of the Russian oil export. So but again, then we come to that question: that is the world market ready for that? It's not about the European market. So, and again, from my perspective, I would say that yes, let's do that, and we kill the Russian war machine. We will not get them enough financing, etc. But again, then the global market comes in, and then this 360 view, not only from the military point of view, but globally, economically, will appear apparently, and then we will discuss that. So again, from the Estonian point of view, from the Latvian, Lithuanian point of view, I believe that there is no question, that let's close it. And it's about the political will, and to Colonel, and I would say that I would ask from the Germans, are you ready to join the coalition of the willing regarding Ukraine? So because at the moment we have around 8 countries who have said that yes, we are ready to contribute, including UK, France, Lithuania, and Estonia, but not many. So this is the question also. And are you ready to go to 3.5% with the defense spendings? So these are the questions that we need to answer, because we have many challenges. We don't have time for that. But I would like to discuss German, Netherlands core, enablers, capability targets in NATO. So
you're hitting the point.
Yeah, well, I know. So anyway, so this is why I believe that the political will is linked to many things, and when we don't have it, then we don't have the decisions. But when we talk about the critical infrastructure, and also the question from the researcher, I would say that as I mentioned in my introductory comments, yes, when we take normal situation, then this hotel is privately owned, and the owner has the responsibility for the electricity, for the maintenance, and everything. When we talk about the critical infrastructure underwater, then we don't have the same understanding. They are laying the cables, they are laying the pipes, but then the responsibility somehow comes to the state. But anyway, when we talk about the possibilities, you asked also the possibilities very quickly. First, you can put sensors onto the cables or onto the pipes. Secondly, you can have sensors somewhere way of the cables. And thirdly, of course, you can have a monitoring system above the sea. So there are options for that, but it's extremely costly for the private entrepreneurs. And when we do that, or when they do that, then this comes to the customers. So that will be on the price of electricity, gas, etc. So the solutions are there. Are we ready to implement them? That means the political question again regarding the oil, gas price, electricity price, etc.
And quick apologies for taking a few minutes, but if you allow, I feel like the panelists should be able to answer some of the questions. Who wants to go first?
Answering Tom's comment on overall structure, and it hits to another political will that we also need, that is on the other side of Atlantic, and that's the US. Because all the system, and that was the consequence of the shadow fleet, because the G7 introduced the oil cap and on $60 per barrel, and that was the consequence. And you're right. If we do nothing, likely the problem will solve, because they will move to the normal oil tankers that are not sanctioned. So we need the political will also from US to lead the way with the sanctions. As it showed and proved so many times before during these 3 years, we need it badly right now also to continue with putting pressure on Russia. And that's why what is happening now, what happened yesterday in Turkey, and what will happen in the upcoming weeks, what will be the decision then of the President Trump, it will cascade down to the very situation that we'll have in the Baltic Sea. And we are ready to go further with sanctioning energy as the main source of income to the Russian war machine. And of course, it will increase the probability of seeing more shadow fleet vessels in Baltic Sea. It is all interconnected. On further escalation from Russia's side below Article 5, I see that their main now effort in Europe is towards our elections that are going, because the final result that they want to achieve, they want to change the political landscape and the support from society towards our policies in supporting Ukraine. That's absolutely clear. So how to achieve this? It's in the Baltics, elsewhere, to mess with the public safety and security, sabotage, fires there and there, just general sense of that we are not safe here. Whether we are dealing with the right thing, whether we are putting right our priorities in this situation. This is one package of the instruments. Elsewhere, these are the elections, and this precondition for the Russians, and answering also Anna's question that whether we are ready to escalate. Russians know the answer. No, you are not ready to escalate. You will de-escalate in each situation. We know what you will do, and we have to change that. I agree.
We should escalate to de-escalate. Anna.
Thank you. Well, again, just to summarize, I think sanctioning all the ships, as many as we can, and in combination with a push to lower the price of the oil cap, I think that would be very effective. And there are countries supporting that, the Nordics, the Baltics, others, and as you said, if we get the US with us, this is the time to do it. Because we want to hit at the Russian war economy, and we shouldn't be afraid to do it. There is also hesitation there. We don't want to crush them, we just want a defeat, yeah? But I think time has passed for that. We have seen now again and again and again that Russia is not interested in peace in Ukraine. So we need a different strategy. And I think these things, they belong together. And I also believe that the question that the President raised on NATO's political will is very important. Okay, perhaps not on Monday, might not be the time for an Article 4, given this incident, I don't know. But if it happens again, I certainly think that it's equivalent to March 3rd, 2014, when Poland asked for an Article 4 consultation because of Russia's actions in Crimea. And because you will have a new situation. And how to get everyone engaged? Well, perhaps this is what's needed, right? Because otherwise, again, it would be pushed to the side, and we will not perhaps realize until too late that we should perhaps have expanded the Baltic Sentry mission or done something new just to stabilize and say to Russia, this is it, this is a NATO lake.
So for comments, will Germany go for Article 4 on Monday?
Mm-hmm. Political will. That's it. Political will is combined with leadership. And as we see it today, we can rely on the capabilities of the United States, but not on the American leadership. So we have to step in. And our Chancellor made it clear this week that this is his sentence. We want to defend us. We want to be able to defend us so that we not need to defend us. So the question must be, do you think that this willingness to defense is extended to whole Europe? And I believe if we want to join the coalition of the willing, this sentence has to be extended to defend whole Europe, because it is replacing the sentence Germany must become kriegstüchtig, war fit again, or apt to conduct wars again. So the defense minister, who will be continuously in his office, must not promulgate the sentence, Germany to become warfighting capable. So this is of utmost importance that Germany is back, but in the sense of stepping in with political leadership, listening to the partners, listening to the concerns, and then also knowing that NATO alone won't help due to some deficiency we are experiencing, and that the European Union to some 2 states will not help in the future, and that we have to overcome also the deadlock with Turkey in the EU-NATO cooperation. So the way out is a coalition of the willing, and my country has a GDP double as high as the Russian one, but we also need to double our effort to understand the security concerns of our neighbors and then to invest. And that's for me a critical political question. And in my country there is a very strong influence of pacifist and national conservative thinking in the old idea of Egon Bahr, who said Ukraine never must belong to the east or to the west. It must always be in between, such like a buffer zone, or some people like a former German Schott who is saying we have to see the countries between Germany and Russia through the Russian glasses, and these countries have to decide either to work with Germany or with Russia. So this is a quarter of our population and a quarter of our politics. This is the AfD and the national conservative thinking. So my plea to my colleagues in the parliament, but also to you, is Germany has to show its will and bring in its capabilities. Then we have also the chance for a case of tension, or at least for Article 4.
All right. Thank you very much. I apologize for taking us some minutes over. Before you leave to continue answering these questions, can I please have a round of applause for the panel? And this panel is closed. Sorry for running late.